Hi there, everybody. Welcome to Motivation Monday. I'm Maurice Williams. I'm really glad to see you today. I hope you had a great weekend. And I thought today we could talk a little bit about micro goals. You might have heard about this before. And if you haven't, this is something new to learn today. Um, and if it's something you've heard before, maybe it's time for a little refresher, a reminder if you're not thought about it yet. Micro goals are small, like actionable steps that help us to achieve bigger goals. And they're kind of task oriented, right? So, like my bigger goal might be to, find my dream job. And my micro goals might be to create a resume. It might be to write an answer to the question, tell me about yourself. It comes up in almost every interview. It might be to sign up for career coaching, right? A micro goal. Sometimes people think of it as a to-do list, where you take that goal and you break it down into the little actionable steps that you would do in order to achieve that goal. And the idea behind micro goals, right? The psychology, if you will, behind, building this list of micro goals is that, some tasks are so big and they take so much time to accomplish that, it takes a while until you really get that positive reinforcement, right? So like if you're trying to lose 100 pounds, right? It's going to take a while to lose that weight. And having that as the goal means that really every day between now and, let's say, for the sake of argument, a year later or 2 years later, even, you're going to have failed in achieving your goal, right? Because it's unlikely that a day later or a week later or a month later, you're going to have hit that goal of losing 100 pounds. But if you break it down into micro goals, right? If you say, okay, how am I going to get to the 100 pounds? Well, one thing I'm going to do to get there is going to be to, visit a nutritionist and set up a new way of eating. Or another micro goal might be to eat more fruits and vegetables, each day. Another micro goal maybe to record what I'm eating, right? You're going to have a lot of positive reinforcement along the way. You're going to get a sense of accomplishment. And, to stick with something, to, sustain it long term, we need, kind of boosts of confidence and motivation. We need to sort of see that we're making progress. And it can really help us a lot if we break it down into these micro goals, right? So it can be really helpful to get that boost of confidence, that sense of accomplishment. It can really help us to be more motivated, right? And to stay focused towards the goal. Each time we achieve one of our micro goals, builds our self-esteem and confidence. It gives us one more thing to check off the list. And, I think we have to remember that if we sit down and we really think about these micro goals, we really start listing what is it going to take to achieve our dream job? What are all the steps that would be needed in order to achieve that goal? In a way, you're building a roadmap for achieving your goal, right? So that is also really helpful, right? Because you now have this like plan for how to get from point A to the final destination, right? So it's helpful for motivation, it's helpful for clarity, right? It's helpful for self-esteem, setting up micro goals. But it can also, if you think about it, it can also make you more more productive. And it can also help with your time management, right? Because you're breaking down this larger task into smaller, bite-sized chunks, you know, into the parts that create the overall goal. So, you kind of start out like, to build these micro goals, like you start out by identifying the larger goal. What is it that you're really trying to achieve at its biggest level? I'm trying to change my economic situation by getting a job that's higher paying. or I'm trying to get into a career that's closer to what I really want to do with my life. Right? So that's a larger goal, figuring out what the large goal is. And then the next step is you take that larger goal and you break it down into small tasks. You create a kind of a to-do list. And the next step would really be to prioritize that to-do list. Like what, now that you have this whole list of things to do, maybe it's 10 pages long, your list, right? Now let's prioritize which of these things I'm going to do first, which I'm going to do second. What are goals, micro goals that require accomplishing first? What can be wait towards a month from now? To essentially prioritize it based on the importance and the urgency. And it's like the idea is to kind of focus on the things that are more critical tasks first. And I have to tell you something else that's an advantage of doing this is that, most of us, when we set out to accomplish a goal, we're most motivated at the beginning of this process. Those first 30, 60, 90 days, those are like the honeymoon period, right? And we've got the more excitement and enthusiasm about accomplishing these goals in that honeymoon period than we're going to have later on. So the idea here is that, if you prioritize these goals, then you're more than likely to accomplish the most important parts of it first in that 30, 60, 90-day time frame. And the next step would be setting a deadline for each micro goal, like kind of essentially making a sort of, interim deadlines for each goal. So if one of your goals on your list is going to be to, to create a resume, maybe your goal is going to be, I'm going to try to finish my resume in the next 2 weeks. I'm going to give myself 14 days to finish my resume. Maybe one of the goals is to, write your summary statement for the resume. So maybe even break down the resume into parts. And you say, okay, by Wednesday, I'm going to write the summary statement for my resume, right? So setting a deadline for each micro goal to help you stay on track. And, one of the key points of any deadline, right, is make sure the deadlines are realistic and achievable within that set time frame. So, unrealistic to say, I'm going to write my whole resume in the next 2 hours. Most people take longer than that. Realistic to say, I'm going to write my summary statement in the next 2 hours. And, the last thing that you should do when you create these micro goals is maybe to have points within it to celebrate your progress. So maybe it's not for every single individual task, but maybe you set some milestones. You say, okay, if I am going to accomplish these 5 tasks, I'm going to give myself a reward for accomplishing these 5 tasks, right? Each one of those micro goals should be specific, measurable, and achievable. You should use that methodology. They call it the SMART method of achieving goals, making sure that they're specific, making sure that they're achievable, making sure that they're measurable. Realistic is another one that people talk about, and making sure they're time-based, that idea of SMART, S-M-A-R-T, each one of those things. Now, listen, we also have to realize that we need to be a little flexible in terms of our goals. Sometimes one of these goals is not achievable, or it turns out to be irrelevant, or it turns out to be, you got to rewrite that goal. So just because you made this list doesn't mean that it's written in stone, right? Sometimes you're going to have to reorder them, rewrite them, adjust those goals as you move through to achieving your bigger objective. But for a lot of people who've never tried this micro goal approach and who try it, they find that projects or objectives that they had in their lives that they were having a hard time getting suddenly become achievable. suddenly become achievable, because, once it's broken down into its smaller elements, it turns out that you can achieve those smaller elements a lot easier than you can this big, huge goal. There's an old saying, like, how do you eat an elephant? A bite at a time. I don't know if you've heard that one before, but it's kind of the same concept of this micro goals. Starting out with smaller, achievable tasks, if you will, in order to accomplish the bigger, larger, more macro goal. So if you haven't given that a whole lot of thought about these micro goals, I hope this kind of inspires you to try that approach. That may really be something that works for you. It works for a lot of people. Some people try to even get it into, smaller ideas, and end up having multiple to-do lists, right? So they take a goal, they break it up into 10 goals, 10 micro goals, if you will. They break those 10 goals into 10 to-do lists, tackling each one of those to-do lists one at a time until they get through it. Lots of ways to do it, but it's, and one of the things I didn't mention that I have found helpful personally in my life with this idea of, breaking it down, is that it takes something that can seem very overwhelming to accomplish and makes it very manageable to accomplish, right? I might not be able to change everything in my life. It seems overwhelming, but, this one smaller goal, I can do. Take my vitamins every day, right? That seems much more manageable than, completely redo my whole life, right? But that seems like massive. Whereas take my vitamins each day, real easy. So I hope this really helps you guys, as it helped me, achieving so much in my life through this micro goal idea. And if you want to stay in touch, you can connect to me on LinkedIn. I love to hear how this is working for you and what you're doing with it. Have a great day and a great week ahead, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.